On the day of my wedding, my fiancé, Nathan Sullivan, and his lover, Vanessa Reed, jumped off the Santa Monica Pier. Hand in hand, they leaped into the crashing waves. Dramatic, reckless, and blinded by so-called love. The world thought they were dead. I thought they were dead. I mourned. I moved on. Now, 10 years later, as I sit in the VIP dining room of the Grand Oak, the most exclusive restaurant in Manhattan, celebrating my sister-in-law's birthday with my in-laws, the door swings open with a bang. The room falls silent. I lift my wine glass lazily, taking a sip, only to find my fingers tightening around the crystal stem. The man standing at the threshold, Nathan Sullivan, my dead fiancé. The warm glow of the chandelier casts eerie shadows on his face. He's thinner, his once sharp features now gaunt. His skin is sickly pale, his clothes worn out. He looks like a ghost who has crawled back from the depths of hell. And beside him, clinging to his arm like a trophy wife, is Vanessa Reed. She hasn't changed. If anything, she's grown more arrogant, more refined in her cruelty. Her deep red dress clings to her perfect curves, her manicured fingers digging possessively into Nathan's arm. And in her other hand, she holds a marriage certificate. She tilts her head, a smirk playing on her lips. Long time no see, Olivia. I place my glass down carefully, my lips curving into a polite smile. Vanessa. Alive and well, I see. She lets out a soft chuckle, her eyes sparkling with amusement. More than well. Then, in a voice dripping with condescension, she turns to my mother-in-law. Margaret, dear, let me introduce you to your grandchildren. From behind them, 3 small children step forward, their big, innocent eyes scanning the room. My mother-in-law, Margaret Sullivan, gasps. Her hand trembles as she reaches for Nathan, her eyes welling with tears. Nathan, my son, you're really here. Nathan steps forward, kneeling before her, his voice hoarse but firm. Mom, I'm back. A choked sob escapes Margaret's lips. Her fingers shake as she covers her mouth, unable to believe what she's seeing. Nathan lowers his head, the perfect image of a lost son, finally finding his way home. Margaret's chair scrapes against the floor as she stumbles forward, reaching for him with both hands. She touches his face, hesitant, disbelieving, before finally pulling him into a trembling embrace. My boy, she whispers, her voice breaking. I prayed for this day. Tears stream down her face as she holds on to him like he might disappear again. The perfect reunion. The lost son returns. Except, of course, I remain seated. I watch the scene unfold, taking another sip of wine, my expression calm. Because this is a performance, a well-rehearsed act, and I refuse to be part of it. Vanessa is watching me. Waiting, expecting. She wants to see a reaction. Shock, devastation, surrender. Instead, I smile. So what? The room stills. Vanessa's smirk falters. Just for a second. I set my glass down, tilting my head slightly as I meet her gaze. Nathan and I lived together for 10 years. We built a life. We had 3 children. I gesture toward the marriage certificate in her perfectly manicured hands. Does that piece of paper erase all of it? The tension in the room is thick. Nathan finally looks at me. Our eyes meet for the first time in 10 years. For a fleeting moment, I see something. Guilt, hesitation, doubt. But then he clenches his jaw, his gaze hardening. It wasn't supposed to happen this way, he says quietly. I laugh. And yet, here we are. I lean back in my chair, crossing my legs, my voice light. Tell me, Nathan, I muse. Are you back for love? I take another sip of wine, my eyes never leaving his. Or are you back for power? Nathan doesn't answer, but he doesn't need to, because we both already know. This isn't about family. It never was. And if he thinks he can walk back into my life and take what's mine, he's already lost. Because this war has only just begun. The Sullivan estate had always been grand, a symbol of power, legacy, and control. Tonight, however, it felt smaller. Not in size, but in space. Because with Nathan's return, it suddenly seemed like there was no room left for me. Margaret Sullivan hadn't let go of Nathan since the moment they stepped into the estate. She hovered over him like a mother protecting a fragile child, fussing over his tired features, cupping his face. running her fingers through his hair as if she still couldn't believe he was real. "My poor boy," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "You've suffered so much." Nathan gave her a weak smile, his voice hoarse. "I'm home now, Mom." Margaret's breath hitched, tears slipping down her cheeks. Her grip on him tightened, as if afraid he might vanish again. And then she turned to the 3 children standing quietly near the grand fireplace, their small faces curious yet hesitant. Margaret's lips trembled. "These are?" Nathan smiled. "Proud. Possessive. Your grandchildren." A hush fell over the room. Margaret staggered back, one hand clutched to her chest. "My," she gasped, blinking back fresh tears. "My grandchildren?" Nathan nodded, motioning for them to step forward. The eldest boy, David, moved first, tall for his age, with Nathan's sharp blue eyes and a quiet confidence that felt almost practiced. He extended his hand politely. "Hello, Grandma." Margaret let out a choked laugh. "Oh, my sweet boy, come here." She pulled him into a tight embrace before turning to the younger 2. Ellie, the delicate, soft-spoken one, and Rose, the youngest, with big round eyes and bouncing curls. Ellie gave a shy smile. "Hi, Grandma." But it was Rose who sealed Margaret's fate. The little girl threw herself into Margaret's arms, giggling as she wrapped her tiny arms around her neck. "Daddy told us all about you." And just like that, Margaret was lost. She cradled them, kissing their foreheads, whispering how much she loved them, how she had wished for this moment. Tears of pure joy ran down her face. Vanessa let out a soft, pleased sigh, watching the scene unfold as if admiring her own masterpiece. And me? I sat back in my chair, watching. Margaret's love for Nathan had never died. But now, with grandchildren in the picture, Nathan had her in the palm of his hand. Margaret wiped her tears, beaming as she turned back to Nathan. "You'll stay here, of course," she said firmly. Nathan hesitated. "Mom, I don't want to intrude." Margaret's eyes flashed. "Nonsense, this is your home. It always has been." She turned to me, and for the first time that night, she finally acknowledged my presence. "Olivia," she said warmly, too warmly, "you don't mind, do you?" The words weren't a request, they were a test I was expected to fail. Because if I refused, if I even hesitated, I would be the villain, the bitter ex, the woman standing in the way of a broken family reuniting. I knew this game. I had played it before, and I never lost. I smiled. Of course. I lifted my wine glass in a casual toast. Anything for family. Margaret beamed. Nathan exhaled in relief. Vanessa smirked. And I sat there, watching them celebrate a victory they hadn't actually won, because they thought they were pushing me aside. What they didn't realize, I was letting them. That night, the Sullivan estate was filled with laughter. Nathan told stories about his time away, half-truths, carefully rehearsed. Margaret listened intently, her devotion solidified with every passing second. She asked about the children, their favorite foods, their hobbies, their schools. She wanted to know everything about them. And me? I watched, listened, and waited. Because this wasn't about family. Nathan wasn't back because he missed his mother. He wasn't back because he wanted to make amends. He was back because he wanted power. And power was something I never surrendered. Not to anyone. Not even to the man I once loved. Because this game had only just begun. And if Nathan thought he could win, he was about to find out who really ran this family. Nathan Sullivan didn't come back for love. He came back for power. I had known it the moment he walked through that restaurant door. The reunion, the tears, the miracle return, it was all part of a carefully crafted performance. And now? Now the next act was beginning. It happened over breakfast. The grand dining hall of the Sullivan estate was filled with the scent of fresh coffee and buttered toast. The morning sun streamed through the towering windows, casting a golden glow over the long oak table. Margaret sat at the head, glowing with happiness, watching as her long-lost son spread jam on little Rose's toast. Vanessa sat beside him, stirring her tea lazily, her gaze flickering toward me with thinly veiled amusement. Nathan, always the showman, leaned back in his chair with a thoughtful expression. Then, as if the thought had just come to him, he cleared his throat. "I've been thinking," he said, his voice measured, casual. "Now that I'm back, it's time for me to reclaim my place in the Sullivan Corporation." The words landed like a grenade. Margaret lit up instantly. "Oh, Nathan, yes, I was hoping you'd say that." She turned to me, expectant, eager. "Olivia, darling, isn't that wonderful?" I set my coffee cup down and smiled. "Wonderful?" I repeated. "That's an interesting word choice." Nathan leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Come on, Olivia. You didn't actually think I'd stay out of the company forever, did you?" I held his gaze. "Why not?" I mused. "You were gone for a decade. Seems like you've gotten quite comfortable letting others clean up your messes." A beat of silence. Vanessa let out a soft chuckle. "Ouch." Nathan's jaw tightened. "That's not fair." I arched a brow. "Isn't it?" Margaret placed a hand over his. "Nathan has every right to be part of the company, Olivia. It's his birthright." Ah, there it was, the real reason we were sitting here, not to discuss, not to negotiate, but for Margaret to deliver her decision. She wanted me to step aside, to hand over what I had built, to make room for her son. Vanessa sighed dramatically, placing a hand over her heart. "Poor Nathan. He just got back, and already he has to fight for what's rightfully his." I turned to her, finally giving her my full attention. "You're right, Vanessa," I said, my tone light. "It's so sad." Her eyes flickered, sensing the trap. I tilted my head, feigning curiosity. "You must be devastated," I added, "knowing that you married a man who abandons the people he loves." The room stilled. Vanessa's grip on her teacup tightened just slightly. Margaret's expression froze. Nathan exhaled through his nose, irritation flashing across his face. "Olivia," but I wasn't finished. I leaned forward, resting my chin on my hand. "Tell me, Nathan," I said softly, "do you plan to abandon this family again? Or is that just something you reserve for your fiancés?" His hands curled into fists. Vanessa opened her mouth, but before she could speak, I turned back to Margaret. "Because I distinctly remember," I continued, "planning a wedding alone." Nathan's face was rigid. Margaret shifted uncomfortably, clearly desperate to steer the conversation back to safer waters. "Olivia," she said gently, "that was a long time ago." "Not long enough," Nathan finally snapped. "I made a mistake, okay?" His voice was sharp, defensive. "I was young. I was reckless. I thought—" He cut himself off. I raised a brow. "You thought what?" He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. "I thought I was doing the right thing." Vanessa crossed her arms. "He was in love." I let out a soft laugh. "And how's that working out for you, Vanessa?" Her eyes flashed. Nathan stood abruptly, pushing back his chair. "That's enough." I leaned back in my seat, satisfied. Because now it was clear. Nathan wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was only sorry it hadn't worked out the way he thought it would. And now? Now he wanted his backup plan. Margaret reached for his arm, patting it soothingly. "Nathan, sweetheart, sit down." She turned to me. "I know this is hard for you, Olivia," she said softly, "but Nathan deserves a place in the company, and I think we both know that. Well," she smiled gently, "you've had your time." Ah, there it was, the final push, the subtle message beneath her words. I had held Nathan's place long enough. Now it was time to return it. Vanessa sipped her tea, clearly relishing every second of this. Nathan's eyes bore into mine, waiting for me to break, to protest, to plead. Instead, I simply smiled. "Of course, Margaret," I said smoothly, "you're absolutely right." Her face lit up. Nathan exhaled, relieved. Vanessa smirked. And I picked up my coffee, took a slow sip, and let them believe they had won. Because what they didn't understand was that I didn't need to fight them for the Sullivan Corporation. I already owned it. Nathan wanted power. Vanessa wanted status. Margaret wanted her son to be the golden boy of the Sullivan family once again, and all three of them wanted me out. It started with a formal request. Nathan had barely been back a week when the letter arrived at my office. A single sheet of ivory paper embossed with the Sullivan family crest, and inside, a demand, a request for a formal review of company leadership, a request to reinstate Nathan Sullivan as an executive of the Sullivan Corporation. I turned the letter over in my hands, my lips curling into a smirk. How predictable. Nathan didn't come back to earn his place. He came back to take mine. That night, Margaret arranged a private meeting with the board. I wasn't invited. Nathan was. Vanessa, of course, tagged along. I had my sources, people who were still loyal to me, who knew exactly what was happening behind closed doors. Margaret played the role of the proud, devoted mother, spinning a story of redemption and legacy. Nathan, she claimed, was ready to take his rightful place. It was his birthright as the eldest son. The company, she argued, was never meant to be run by an outsider. I let the words sit with me for a moment. After 10 years of building this empire, of sacrificing everything, of making the Sullivan Corporation stronger than ever, she still saw me as temporary, replaceable. Something to be discarded. Big mistake. The next morning, Nathan walked into my office like he owned the place. Vanessa followed, her red lips curved into a mocking smile. I didn't look up from my desk. To what do I owe the pleasure? Nathan dropped a thick file onto my desk. I finally looked up. Let me guess, I said dryly. This is where you try to steal my company? Nathan didn't smile. It's not stealing, he said. It's taking back what's mine. I leaned back, crossing my arms. Yours? I echoed. Funny, I don't remember you in the boardroom when I saved this company from collapse. I don't remember you fighting through market crashes, restructuring debts, handling billion-dollar deals. I tapped a manicured nail against my desk. All I remember is you disappearing. Nathan's jaw tightened. I had my reasons. Vanessa sighed dramatically. Olivia, let's be reasonable. Nathan is the rightful heir. Surely you don't expect to keep all of this to yourself? I smiled. Why not? Nathan took a breath, schooling his features into something neutral. I don't want to fight you, he said smoothly. But we both know this company was meant for me. And whether you like it or not, the board is considering my return. I let out a soft chuckle. The board can consider whatever they want. Then I stood and leaned forward. But let me make something crystal clear, Nathan. My voice was soft, dangerous. You don't deserve this company. I walked around my desk, closing the distance between us. You abandoned it. You abandoned me. You abandoned everything. Nathan's nostrils flared, but I didn't give him a chance to speak. You think you can walk back in here and take what I built? I whispered. You think Margaret pulling strings behind the scenes is enough to replace me? I let out a soft laugh. You have no idea who you're up against. Nathan didn't move. Vanessa's smirk faltered, and in that moment they realized I wasn't scared of them. I wasn't going to step aside. I wasn't going to lose. Nathan set his jaw. Then I guess I'll see you in the boardroom, I smiled, looking forward to it. By the end of the week, the lines were drawn. Nathan and Vanessa worked tirelessly to turn the family against me. Margaret rallied the board, calling in old favors, manipulating longtime allies. Vanessa whispered in the ears of shareholders and family members, playing the role of devoted wife, perfect mother, loyal Sullivan. And me? I did what I always did. I waited. Because in a battle like this, it wasn't about the first move, it was about the last. And when I finally struck, they wouldn't see it coming. Power struggles don't happen overnight. They build quietly, like cracks in a foundation, slow, steady, and inevitable. And tonight, as I sat in the grand dining hall of the Sullivan estate, watching Margaret orchestrate my downfall, I realized something. The house was collapsing, and I was the only one who saw it. It wasn't a formal boardroom battle yet. Margaret was too smart for that. Instead, she called for a private family meeting, disguising it as an intimate gathering over dinner, a casual talk among loved ones. Except, nothing about this was casual. The air was thick with unspoken tension. Margaret sat at the head of the table, her hands delicately folded, her gaze filled with forced warmth. Nathan sat beside her, his posture relaxed, but his fingers tapping restlessly against the table. Vanessa, of course, was there too, sipping her wine like she already knew how this would end. And around the table? Other Sullivans, distant cousins, uncles, aunts, family members who held stakes in the company. People who had once been firmly on my side. But tonight, they were wavering. I could see it in their eyes, because Margaret had been working, and she was about to make her move. Margaret sighed, placing her glass down carefully. "Olivia, dear," she began, her voice soft, too soft. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the whiskey in my glass. This was going to be good. Margaret smiled. "I think it's time we discuss the future of the Sullivan Corporation." Nathan sat up straighter, playing the role of reluctant heir perfectly. "I don't want to cause trouble," he said, "but I believe I should be allowed to contribute to the company's success." Margaret nodded approvingly. She turned back to me, her expression gentle, as if she were asking me for a favor. "I know you've done a wonderful job leading the company, Olivia," she said. "But the time has come for Nathan to reclaim his place." Silence, and then she delivered the final blow. "You should transfer a portion of your shares to him." The words landed like a gunshot. Margaret continued, her voice full of calculated sympathy. "Nathan is my firstborn," she said, "the rightful heir to this family. You've done well, Olivia, but the company was never meant to be yours." There it was, not a request, a decision, one that had been made without me. I scanned the room, watching as loyal family members hesitated. Some exchanged glances, some looked away. And I knew. Margaret had been planting doubt. She had spent days, weeks reminding them who Nathan was, the true Sullivan, the blood heir. She had made them question their loyalties. And now they were crumbling. I set my glass down carefully. Then I smiled. Because if they thought I was going to panic, they didn't know me at all. I folded my hands on the table, my gaze cool and unreadable. "No," Margaret blinked. "What?" I tilted my head. "I said no." A beat of silence. Nathan tensed. Vanessa's smirk twitched. Margaret exhaled as if she were disappointed. "Olivia," she said, her voice laced with patience, "this is what's best for the family." I let out a soft laugh. "The family?" I repeated. I scanned the room, looking each of them in the eye, the same people who had supported me for years, the same people who now hesitated. "You mean the family that's been perfectly happy under my leadership for a decade?" I asked. "The family that I saved from financial ruin? The family that thrived while Nathan was—" I gestured vaguely toward him. "Where were you again?" Nathan's jaw tightened. "That's not fair," he muttered. I ignored him. I turned to Margaret. "I built this company," I said evenly. "I protected it. I expanded it. I leaned forward. And I will not hand it over just because you suddenly remembered you have a son." The room fell silent. Margaret stiffened. Nathan's eyes darkened. Vanessa's smirk disappeared completely. I had made my position clear. And now, the battle lines were drawn. Margaret sighed heavily, as if she were the victim here. "I had hoped we could settle this peacefully," she murmured. I arched a brow. "And if we can't?" Margaret met my gaze, and for the first time in years, she didn't look at me as her daughter-in-law. She looked at me as an obstacle, one she intended to remove. Nathan stood, pushing his chair back. "I don't want to fight you, Olivia," he said. I picked up my whiskey and took a slow sip. I smiled. "Then, don't." The meeting ended with no agreement. No resolution, only a clear message. Nathan was coming for my company, and Margaret would help him take it. The Sullivan family, it was no longer mine. Not entirely, because Margaret had succeeded in planting one final seed of doubt. And now, some of them, people I once trusted, were beginning to question who should lead. I walked out of that meeting knowing one thing for certain. I was alone in this fight, but I had never needed anyone before, and I wouldn't start now. Because Nathan and Margaret thought they could push me out. They thought they could erase me. But they had forgotten one crucial thing. This wasn't just their empire anymore. It was mine. And if they wanted it back, they'd have to burn it all down. And I would make sure they did. Nathan had spent 10 years hiding, 10 years letting people believe he had suffered, that he had been struggling, lost, desperate, that he had finally come home to reclaim his rightful place. But I knew better, and now I had the proof. It hadn't taken long. People like Nathan and Vanessa always left a trail. All I had to do was follow it. The private investigator I hired was one of the best. He worked quietly, efficiently, digging up every detail Nathan and Vanessa had tried to bury. And when he finally delivered his findings, even I was impressed. Nathan hadn't been suffering. He hadn't been barely surviving. He had been living like a king. Private yachts, luxury hotels, exclusive resorts, all paid for with stolen corporate funds. Money siphoned from offshore accounts connected to Sullivan Corporation. And Vanessa? She had been busy too. My investigator traced a pattern. Nathan wasn't the first wealthy man she had latched onto. Before him, there had been others. Older men, CEOs, heirs to powerful families, each one mysteriously falling for Vanessa. Each one losing something valuable in the process. Some lost money, some lost businesses, some lost reputations. But Nathan? He was her biggest success. She had helped him burn every bridge with the Sullivan family, and now she was here to finish the job. But unfortunately for her, I was still standing in the way. Margaret Sullivan had always loved grand displays, so it wasn't surprising when she arranged a family dinner to formally discuss Nathan's future within the company. The estate was filled with Sullivans that evening, loyalists to Margaret, a few neutral members, and others who had begun to question their allegiance. Margaret sat at the head of the table, glowing with excitement. Nathan and Vanessa were at her side, both oozing confidence. And me? I sat quietly, sipping my wine, waiting for my moment. Because tonight I wasn't here to argue. I wasn't here to defend myself. I was here to bury them. Nathan cleared his throat. I know this transition hasn't been easy, he began smoothly. But I want you all to know I'm committed to the Sullivan legacy. I want to take this company into the future. Margaret beamed. Vanessa placed a reassuring hand on his arm. And the family? Some nodded. Some hesitated. Some were waiting to be convinced, which was exactly why I spoke next. That's funny, I mused, setting my glass down, because last I checked you spent the past decade stealing from the company. The room froze. Nathan's expression darkened. Excuse me? I reached for my bag, pulling out a thick folder, and then I threw it onto the table. The pages spilled out, revealing bank statements, financial transactions, offshore accounts. Proof. Nathan stiffened. Vanessa went pale. I leaned back in my chair. Do you recognize these accounts, Nathan? I asked, tilting my head. He said nothing. Margaret frowned, reaching for the documents. Her eyes scanned the papers. What is this? She murmured. The truth, I replied. I turned to the rest of the family. For 10 years, Nathan wasn't struggling. He wasn't lost. He was living off company money. Whispers spread like wildfire. Margaret's grip on the papers tightened. That can't be true. Oh, but it is, I said sweetly. I flipped to the next page, revealing photos. Nathan on a yacht in Greece. Nathan at a luxury resort in Dubai. Nathan driving a 6-figure sports car in Monte Carlo. Every image dated. Every moment bought with stolen money. Margaret turned to Nathan, shaken. Tell me this isn't true. Nathan's jaw clenched. It's not what it looks like. I chuckled. It looks like fraud. Nathan glared at me. You have no idea what I went through. No? I raised a brow. Then why don't you tell us? He said nothing, because there was nothing he could say. And just when I thought the night couldn't get better, I turned to Vanessa. Now, about your wife. Vanessa flinched. What about her? Margaret asked. I slid another file across the table. Vanessa has an interesting history, I said. Did you know she's been with at least 4 different high-profile men before Nathan? Margaret's face dropped. Businessmen, CEOs, wealthy heirs, and every time, Vanessa walked away richer. I flipped the page, revealing court cases, accusations, settlements. Nathan turned to Vanessa, confusion flickering in his eyes. What is this? He demanded. Vanessa stayed silent. Margaret's voice shook. Vanessa, tell me this isn't true. Vanessa forced a smile. It's all misunderstandings. I smirked. Is that what you told the CEO of Westward Holdings? Margaret's breathing grew unsteady. Nathan's hands curled into fists. Vanessa stayed frozen, because for the first time she realized she had lost control of the narrative. Margaret rose to her feet, hands shaking, her perfect image of Nathan shattered, her trust in Vanessa obliterated. Nathan turned to his mother. Mom, But she held up a hand. Not another word, she whispered. The family watched in stunned silence, and me? I stood, smoothed my dress, picked up my wine glass, and as I turned to leave, I looked over my shoulder. You wanted a war, Nathan? I murmured. I took a slow sip. Congratulations, you just lost it. And with that I walked away, because in the game of power, I always win. Nathan Sullivan was drowning, and he knew it. After the family gathering, after the evidence, the humiliation, the shattered trust, he had been left with nothing but desperation. But desperation makes people dangerous, and I wasn't about to let him take me down with him. Nathan spent the next week trying to salvage what little power he had left. He called in favors, scheduled private meetings with Sullivan Corporation's board members, reached out to business partners, old friends, family members who still pitied him. He promised them change, told them I was too ruthless, too controlling, that he was the rightful heir, and I had taken what wasn't mine. And Margaret, despite everything, despite the fraud, the lies, the betrayal, she still stood by him. I shouldn't have been surprised. A mother's love, after all, is blind. We can fix this, she whispered to me one evening, her voice filled with desperate hope. I sipped my wine. Fix what? She swallowed hard. Nathan made mistakes, but he's still my son. He deserves a second chance. I set my glass down and studied her. You think I built all of this just to hand it over to a man who abandoned it? Margaret's lips parted as if she wanted to argue, but I didn't give her the chance. I didn't spend the last 10 years saving this company, I said coldly, just so you could gift it to your son like a birthday present. She flinched, because we both knew that's exactly what she wanted. Nathan's final desperate move came in the form of a formal takeover proposal, a direct challenge to my authority as CEO. He had gathered just enough support from board members who still believed in the Sullivan name, enough to call for a final vote, one last chance to overthrow me. So I gave him exactly what he wanted. A fight. The boardroom was filled with powerful men and women, all seated around the long glass table, the Sullivan Corporation logo gleaming on the wall behind me. Nathan sat across from me, Vanessa at his side, her expression too smug for someone standing on a sinking ship. Margaret was there too, her hands folded, her face unreadable. Nathan stood, straightening his jacket like this was already won. I called this meeting, he began smoothly, because it's time for change. This company was meant to be run by a Sullivan, not by someone who... He hesitated, but we all knew what he wanted to say. Not by someone who wasn't family, I smiled. Go on, Nathan. Don't hold back now. He clenched his jaw. The board must recognize that I am the rightful heir, he continued. I propose that Olivia step down from her position as CEO. I raised a hand. Enough. The room fell silent. I leaned forward. And then I dropped my own stack of documents onto the table. Nathan blinked. What? These, I said smoothly, are signed agreements from 51% of the shareholders. Nathan's face drained of color. I smiled. They've agreed to a new proposal, I continued, my tone casual. One that strips you of any claim to the Sullivan Corporation. Forever. Margaret gasped. Nathan shot to his feet. You can't do that. I tilted my head. I already did. Nathan's breathing grew heavy. You don't have the power to. Actually, I cut in. I do. I tapped my fingers against the final contract on the table. Because you see, Nathan... I leaned in, my voice dropping to a deadly whisper. You were never the heir. I was. Nathan's entire world collapsed in that moment. Vanessa gripped his arm, whispering frantically. Margaret looked at me, eyes wide with disbelief. I leaned back in my chair, utterly calm. I built this company, I said. I saved it, I expanded it, and now it belongs to me." Nathan shook his head. "No," he whispered. "This isn't how it's supposed to be." His voice cracked, and for the first time he looked afraid. I stood, gathering my papers. Then I looked at the board members, my allies, the people who had stood by me through everything. "Ladies and gentlemen," I announced, "Nathan Sullivan is officially removed from any and all involvement with Sullivan Corporation, effective immediately." A security guard stepped forward. Nathan's chair scraped against the floor as he stumbled back. His breathing was shallow, his entire body rigid with disbelief. And then, for the first time since he walked back into my life, he realized he had lost. The doors slammed shut behind him. The board members began gathering their things, murmuring among themselves. Vanessa had left without a word, a rat abandoning a sinking ship. Margaret sat still, frozen, staring at me. I met her gaze, waiting, hoping she would finally understand. But all she saw was her son's failure, not his greed, not his lies, not the damage he had almost done, just failure. And I realized with quiet finality she would never see me as family. So I said nothing. I simply picked up my things and walked away. Nathan Sullivan had lost everything, his company, his legacy, his place in the family, and now in the most brutal twist of fate, he was about to lose the last thing he had left. It happened that same night, after the boardroom humiliation, after the security guards escorted him out of his own family's empire. Nathan had nowhere to go. He returned to the Sullivan estate, looking for comfort, for Margaret, for Vanessa, for anyone. But as he stepped inside, still dazed, still shaken, he found Vanessa standing at the grand staircase, waiting for him, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Nathan exhaled, running a hand through his hair. "Vanessa!" Slap! The sharp crack of her palm across his face echoed through the foyer. Nathan stumbled back, his face twisted in shock. Vanessa smiled, but it wasn't kind. "You're pathetic," she hissed. Nathan blinked, still reeling. "Excuse me?" Vanessa sighed dramatically, pacing. "I bet everything on you, Nathan. Everything. And what do I get in return?" She gestured wildly around the room. This failure? Nathan clenched his fists. "I can still fix this." Vanessa let out a cruel laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," she murmured, stepping closer. "You still don't get it, do you?" Nathan froze. Something in her voice. Something cold, calculated. Then Vanessa tilted her head and dropped the final bombshell. "David, Ellie, Rose," she sighed, "they're not yours." The room fell silent. Nathan's stomach dropped, his ears rang. His mind refused to process what he had just heard. "What?" he whispered. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Do you really think I'd waste 10 years of my life waiting for you?" She scoffed. "You were gone, Nathan. I had to survive." Nathan took a step back. "No," he muttered, shaking his head. "You're lying." Vanessa's lips curled. "Am I?" She pulled out her phone, tapped the screen, and held it up. DNA results. Undeniable proof. Nathan staggered back. His entire world collapsed. The children, his children, they had never been his, not for a single second. His breathing grew shallow. His hands shook. Everything, his marriage, his family, the life he thought he had built, it had all been a lie. Margaret Sullivan had been watching from the hallway, and now she stepped forward. Her face was pale. Her hands trembled as she turned to Vanessa. "Tell me that's not true," she whispered. Vanessa sighed. "Oh, Margaret," she said sweetly, "of course it's true." Margaret let out a choked sound. Nathan turned to her, desperate. "Mom, I didn't know." Margaret's face twisted in pain. "All this time," she whispered. She looked at Vanessa, then at the children, asleep upstairs, oblivious to the storm raging below, then at Nathan, and finally, at herself. The blind woman who had refused to see the truth, the mother who had spent years defending a son who wasn't worth saving. Her breath hitched, tears burned her eyes, and then she broke. "Get out." Nathan's blood ran cold. Margaret's voice shook with fury. "Get out of my house," she whispered. "Both of you." Nathan's mouth opened, but no words came out. Margaret turned away. And just like that, she was done with him. Vanessa arched a brow. "Well, she muttered. That's my cue. She grabbed her purse, walking toward the door. Nathan stared after her, frozen in disbelief. Vanessa, he croaked. Vanessa paused. Then she turned to him and delivered the final blow. Oh, sweetheart, she purred. I already did. And with a flick of her hair, she walked out. Nathan stood there, alone, his once grand return reduced to nothing. Nathan had always been the golden boy, the one who had it all, the one who threw it all away. And now, he was nothing. Margaret refused to speak to him. The family had turned their backs, the company was gone, his marriage was over, his children weren't even his, and Olivia Carter? She was still standing. She had won, because in the end, Nathan hadn't just lost the game, he had never known how to play. Nathan Sullivan had spent his whole life believing he was untouchable. That no matter how much he failed, no matter how much he betrayed, the Sullivan name would always protect him. But power doesn't come from a name. It comes from who holds it. And now, he had nothing. Days passed after Nathan's downfall. The estate was quiet. No more arguments, no more whispered plotting, no more illusions of a family that never truly existed. Margaret hadn't left her room in days. She had spent years building a lie in her head, believing Nathan was the perfect son, the rightful heir, the golden boy who could do no wrong. Now, she knew the truth, and it destroyed her. One evening, as I sat in the library reviewing corporate reports, I heard soft footsteps behind me. I already knew who it was. Margaret stood at the door, her face tired, lined with regret. Olivia, she said quietly. I didn't look up. She hesitated before stepping closer. I was wrong? She whispered. About everything. I turned a page. Silence stretched between us. Margaret's breath hitched. I let him manipulate me, she admitted. I let him. Her voice broke. I failed you. I finally looked at her. She had aged 10 years in a week, and for the first time I saw it. She wasn't Margaret Sullivan, the matriarch who had tried to erase me from my own empire. She was just a woman who had lost everything. She lowered her gaze. I don't expect forgiveness, she whispered, but I wanted you to know. I studied her for a long moment. Then I nodded once. Not an acceptance, not an invitation for reconciliation, just acknowledgement. Margaret understood. She gave me one last look and walked away. For the first time, she didn't expect me to follow. The next night, it was Nathan's turn. I had just left a late meeting when I found him waiting for me outside the Sullivan Corporation headquarters. He looked nothing like the man who had walked back into my life weeks ago. His suit was wrinkled, his eyes were hollow, his confidence was gone, and yet he still thought he had a chance. Olivia, he called out, his voice hoarse. I sighed. Nathan. He stepped forward, desperate. I know I messed up, he rushed. I know I made mistakes, but I tilted my head. Which one? Nathan faltered. I crossed my arms. The fraud? The betrayal? The fact that you let Vanessa destroy you? Nathan swallowed hard. I can fix this, he whispered. I arched a brow. You can't even fix yourself. His hands shook. Please, he begged. I need you. There it was. The truth. Nathan never wanted me. He wanted what I had, what he could no longer reach. I took a slow breath, watching him fall apart. And then with the same calm, measured voice I had always used in the boardroom, I gave him my final answer. No. Nathan froze. I stepped closer, lowering my voice to a whisper. You lost, Nathan. I leaned in, my breath warm against his ear. And no one is coming to save you. Nathan's body shook, his final hope shattered. His mouth opened, but I was already walking away. I didn't turn back. I didn't need to. Because when I reached my car and glanced at the reflection in the tinted windows, Nathan was still standing there, alone, like he always would be. By the end of the week, the Sullivan name was no longer his. The family cut ties completely. His bank accounts, frozen. His investments, gone. The house, seized. Margaret refused to see him again. The rest of the family? They erased him like he had never existed. And Nathan Sullivan, the man who had once thought he could take everything from me, vanished. No one knew where he went. No one cared. And for the first time in a long, long while, I felt peace. One evening, I sat on the balcony of the Sullivan estate, a glass of wine in hand, watching the city lights flicker below. For the first time, the house felt different. Lighter, quieter, at peace. Nathan was gone. Vanessa was gone. Margaret had retreated into self-imposed exile. And me? I was still here, still standing, still holding everything they had tried to take. I had spent so long preparing for this war, I never stopped to think about what came after. But as I watched the skyline, I realized this was the after. And for the first time in years, I was free. Power wasn't given. It wasn't inherited. It was earned, piece by piece, battle by battle, until there was no one left to challenge it. And now, I stood alone at the top, unshaken, unmatched, unstoppable. With Nathan gone and the family's control broken, the Sullivan Corporation was mine in every way that mattered. And under my leadership, it thrived. I cut out every weak link, every old alliance tied to Nathan's failure. I expanded into new industries, new global markets. Within a year, Sullivan Corporation wasn't just stable, it was untouchable. Board members who had once doubted me now praised me. Investors who had hesitated now clamored for my attention. The world finally understood what Nathan never did. I wasn't just holding the throne for someone else. I was the throne. One afternoon, Margaret requested a meeting. I agreed, out of curiosity, not obligation. We met in one of Sullivan Corporation's private conference rooms. She looked older, smaller, as if the weight of her past had finally caught up to her. She offered me a tired smile. "You've done well," she admitted. I gave her a polite nod. Margaret exhaled. "You're leaving, aren't you?" I met her gaze. Yes. She already knew what I meant. I wasn't just leaving the Sullivan family. I was erasing it from my life completely. She didn't fight it. She just nodded, eyes filled with something close to understanding. And when I walked out of that room, I never looked back. My children would never know the chaos of betrayal. They would never be used as pawns in a battle for power. I raised them to be strong, independent, untouchable. They would never have to fight the wars I fought, because I had already won them. Nathan never recovered. With no money, no connections, no power, he faded into nothing. Occasionally I'd hear whispers of him, working odd jobs, sleeping in cheap motels, living a life he once would have sneered at. But I never sought him out. I never tried to find him. Nathan Sullivan had once thought he was destined to rule. Now he was forgotten, and I was untouchable. One evening, I stood on the balcony of my penthouse, a glass of wine in hand, watching the skyline stretch endlessly before me. This was my empire, not Sullivan's, mine. The past was gone. The betrayals, the wars, the losses, all buried beneath my victories. I had won, and I would never lose again. I took a slow sip of wine, then I turned away and never looked back. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to give it a like and subscribe so you don't miss any future content.